Hey everybody, I just wanted to talk to you about a little thing that happened to me earlier on today. I've already posted a video concerning a conversation I had with the Canadian Firearms Centre, and it was a bit of a disturbing conversation. I'm not going to go into that, but I do want to talk to you about something else that came up. After I had discussed what I needed to discuss with them, I did ask them about getting through to them and if I wasn't able to. And the reason being is I tried calling yesterday, and it was 3 p.m., 3 or 3:30 p.m., and I couldn't get through. The telephone service said that the center was closed, which was a bit disturbing. It's the middle of the week, and they say they're supposed to be open till 5 p.m. So I called back today. When I first called back, I couldn't get through. They said they were experiencing too many calls. Now, you always get that recording, so clearly they're not receiving too many calls, they're just understaffed. So I did ask them, well, because of all these problems, they said that they were having problems with their system and whatnot. And the Canadian Firearms Centre is also closed on the weekends. So I asked them, well, what kind of liability would I be facing if I had a short-term ATT to leave the province to maybe go shoot a match in Alberta or Ontario? And something happened. Either my flight was grounded for some reason, or my truck broke down, and I was forced to stay a few more days. But I couldn't get through to the center. Either the telephone system was down, or it was a weekend. And he said, well, you got to plan ahead. You got to plan ahead and call ahead and get your ATT ahead of time. Clearly he didn't really understand what I was saying, because I told him in a situation, in a scenario where I already had an ATT and I needed to call to get it extended, and I couldn't get through. The question was, what kind of liability would I have if it's no fault of my own? So he obviously didn't want to answer that question. Nice enough guy, like I had no problem with him, and I think that he just didn't understand. Instead of having a long conversation with him and arguing or whatever, I decided, well, okay, fine, we'll just leave it at that, and that was it. Now, that does bring up a bit of a concern, because a few years back, several years back, I was being transferred from a large city to a small place. And it was a 13-hour drive from where I was being transferred from to where I was being transferred to. And I needed an authorization to transport. Now, the issue was, it was summertime and the province was on fire. It was one of those years where everything seemed to be burning. And there were road closures everywhere. As a matter of fact, there was some serious road closures between where I lived and where I needed to go, with no other option, the only road through. So when I called up to get my authorization to transport, I said, I need a lot of time. How much time? She asked. I said, well, could you give me a week? Then she said, well, I'm going to have to check on that. She comes back a little while later and says, it's only a 2-hour drive from where you are to where you're going to. Well, that made me laugh, because clearly she didn't understand the size of British Columbia. She obviously looked up on a map and was thinking in terms of the size of New Brunswick. Well, maybe in New Brunswick that distance on a map would only be 2 hours, but in British Columbia it was a 13-hour drive. And I explained to her, not only is it a 13-hour drive, but the government agency that I work for, not only do they not require me to drive past 500 kilometers, it's actually mandated that I don't, for Treasury Board rules at the time. So I was going to need at least 2 days to get there, but the province is on fire and there's road closures. So I'm going to need an extended period of time in case I can't make it through, yada, yada, yada. Well, her advice to me was, call back if you need an extension. Okay. Now, there's a huge problem with that. First off, she wouldn't give me the time I could potentially need. I ended up making it through only because special authorization. But if I was just a normal citizen, I wouldn't have been able to get through. And that's kind of disturbing because the Canadian Firearms Centre isn't open 24 hours a day, and they're not open on the weekends. And they clearly have problems with their phone system, and they clearly close early. So what if you're stuck? What would happen? Hopefully you're not checked by the police, because it's not your fault. And if they check you, there may be some political pressure to charge you. And if you're thinking, well, they wouldn't do that. Yeah, I used to think the same. And personally, I wouldn't. But I used to think the same. Until recently. There was a case of a sergeant with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Saskatchewan. He had a restricted firearms license. He had a restricted firearm. He inadvertently let his firearms license lapse. So he was charged criminally. To me, that is just insane. First off, he wasn't intending to violate the law. It was an administrative thing. He made an honest mistake, and they charged him. This could potentially ruin his life. If he gets convicted, he won't be able to travel to the United States. Even if he's charged, there's a good possibility that will make the NCIC a computer system, and he'll be stopped at the border and won't be able to cross. So that's a huge, huge thing. And he wasn't trying to violate the law. And he's not a threat to anyone. These laws, although I agree with many of them, the way they're administered is kind of iffy at times. Because it's not about public safety. It's about politics. And having worked for the Canadian government for 37 years on and off, I know that talking with prosecutors and dealing with prosecutors and dealing with lawyers is not about justice. It's about, can they win? No question about should they win, should they prosecute, but can they win? And to me, that's a huge, huge problem. So I do recommend that you take these licensing requirements seriously. I agree with licensing. I just think that that there should be a little bit more common sense in how it's applied. And it can raise a lot of problems for you if you're on a trip somewhere and something happens and you can't get back in time. Is that possible? It's absolutely possible. What happens if you have an accident and you're in the hospital? If you're in the hospital because of an accident, the last thing you're going to be thinking about is extending your ATT. But you could be prosecuted. They obviously don't care, because they're charging this guy, and all he did was let his license expire. Is it bad for him to have done that? Okay, maybe some would argue that that's a problem. But why is it? Why is it a problem? Why don't we have a lifetime license? Or at least until you're 65 or 75, until such time as people start to experience cognitive decline. Why do we have to get it renewed every 5 years? The police are doing checks on us all the time. If we do something that makes us ineligible to own a license, that will come up automatically. So why do we have to even renew? It doesn't make a lot of sense. This whole authorization to transport, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense either. The requirement that you have a range membership to purchase a gun in addition to your license, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you're licensed to own a gun. They say you're a reasonable enough person to own a gun. Why then do you need a range membership or a club membership? You have a license, so you have a gun, you know the transportation requirements. Why do you need a special authorization to move your property from your home to where you can legally use it? It doesn't make a lot of sense. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Not only do you have to worry about being legal in the sense of not committing a crime, but you also have to be very cognitive of the administrative procedures, because you can get into a lot of trouble. A simple oversight in renewing an application, or if you're just caught on the road and your authorization to transport expires through no fault of your own. So keep that in mind, And keep in mind that the Canadian Firearms Centre, you should plan ahead, and if it expires while you're out there, just give us a call. But you can't just give them a call. Oftentimes they're closed. And even if they are open, a lot of times, and this has happened to me more than once, more than just today, you just can't get through. I hope this helped a little bit, and stay tuned. We'll talk about some more stuff a little later. Hey everybody, Northwest Cavalryman here. And if you enjoyed this video or any of my videos, please click subscribe and like. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time.